Welcome back. Thank you for your patience. We'll have our Q&A session now with myself, Gene Min, and Bina working on the BsUFA and myself working on PDUFA. So let me go over some of the questions we've received so far. So one of the questions we received, does the application fee apply to IND and IND amendments? Now I'm going to assume this is in reference to PDUFA fees, and if it's in reference to PDUFA fees, there are no fees for INDs and IND amendments. We only have two types of fees, and that applies to the application fees, which are for NDAs and BLAs, and then there's the annual program fees. Another question we received, for the PDUFA program fee, an applicant is exempt if they are the same product as another product. For example, in the Orange Book with the TE code. If the originator NDA is the same as several approved ANDAs, which are listed with the TE code for an Orange Book, the NDA applicant is not charged a program fee. However, none of the approved ANDAs are actually marketed, but are incorrectly listed as RX or discontinued in the Orange Book. How does FDA ensure that the correct program fee is collected? Well, there's a couple different parts to this. First of all, as I mentioned in my slides, there are requirements when it comes to NDAs and ANDAs. The reporting requirements listed in 506I does state that firms are required to notify FDA. This is law. So the information should be accurate if the firms notify us appropriately. In addition, we do send firms, the innovative firms, the Dear Colleague letter, which does show what you might be charged for the next fiscal year. It is up to the firms to do their research and make sure they are being charged correctly. So if you believe there are any generics currently available in the market which aren't identified in the Orange Book as being marketed, you should notify FDA that it is incorrect and we will update it accordingly. I hope that answers your question. Another question we received. If you're repurposing an approved FDA drug with a new indication, are you charged a fee? Well, this one it depends. For example, you can have a application that you're adding an indication that can be submitted technically in a supplement if you're just adding an indication. But if you're repurposing an FDA approved drug, for example, you're submitting as a 505(b)(2) application where you're referencing the safety and effectiveness data from another drug which you do not own, then that needs to be submitted in a new application which would be charged a fee. And if it's going to be for a new indication, most likely there will be clinical data associated with it, so you would be charged a full fee, approximately $2.6 million. Next question. For the orphan exemption of the annual program fee, does the gross revenue refer to all products marketed by the company, not just the orphan product? The gross worldwide revenue actually applies to all revenue, not just to drugs. So if you have affiliates that are generating revenue for you that have nothing to do with the pharmaceutical field, that is still considered revenue and must be accounted for in the gross worldwide revenue. So to answer your question, it is all revenue, not just to pharmaceutical products. Another question, do they have to have all three priority drug, fast track, and status, and new molecular entity? I'm assuming this is referring to either the public health waiver or the barrier to innovation waiver, and the answer to that is no. These are just some considerations that we look at. These are the factors that are taken into consideration, but you don't have to have all three. Some of them might outweigh the other. As you go through that list of considerations, you don't have to meet all of them, but we do look at them and they are taken and we do weigh them out. Some of them might have more weight versus others, but it is usually on a case-by-case basis. Next, can and do people request multiple waivers? In one case, is one not met? I believe you're asking, can I submit multiple waivers at the same time? And the answer to that question, yes. If you believe you qualify for a small business, a public health, and a barrier to innovation, you may submit a request for all three of them at the same time. Is it recommended? Most likely, I would recommend you do submit all of them, because in case for one reason or another you do not qualify for one of them, you have the others to see if you can be granted on the other situations. Let's see. Next question. If an NDA has two product line listing under the Orange Book with no TE code, and if the applicant discontinues one of the product line listed by September 30th prior to the next federal fiscal year, is the applicant only assessed a program fee for one product line listing in the active section of the Orange Book? So just to make sure I rephrase that, basically, if I have two products that are currently listed in the marketed section, and one of them is discontinued and is correctly discontinued by September 30th, yes, you would only be charged one program fee because the other one was correctly moved to the discontinued section. Next question. I believe we may qualify both the small business waiver. I'm sorry, this is a repeat of the other question, if I can submit multiple waivers at the same time. The answer is yes, you may submit multiple waivers at the same time. Next is, let's see, I think those are all the PDUFA ones that I currently have on hand. Let me hand off to Bina, and she will talk about some of the BSUFA questions we received.
Okay, so one question we received is, are single nucleotides also considered biologics? And just want to point out that the biological products are large complex molecules, and so for proteins, they have to be greater than 40 amino acids. Now, how much is a meeting fee, and is it paid for each meeting? The initial BPD fee is $185,409, and it is a one-time fee to enter the BPD program. So it is not for every meeting request that the sponsor would like to with FDA. It's just a one-time fee, which is with an IND submission or a meeting request, whichever comes first. But then after that one fee is paid, then the annual BPD fee kicks in until the sponsor submits an application that is accepted for filing. Thought there was another one. Oh, is a biosimilar the only product that requires a user fee payment upon IND submission or a meeting request? I cannot speak for other user fee programs, but under BSUFA, there is a user fee for an IND submission or a meeting request.
Thank you again. Another question we received regarding refunds of application fees. If a firm submits their application and fee but has not received orphan drug designation, how can they ensure a fee refund if the orphan designation is received more than 180 days after the NDA and BLA is submitted? So when you do submit your application and your orphan designation is pending, and you wish to start the process and you pay the fee, it is recommended that you submit your request at the time of submission. So that way it meets the requirements of being submitted within 180 days as the fee is due. So if you are asking for a refund, please submit it when you submit your application. That is probably the best time to submit it. Even though the orphan designation is still pending, it will be considered part of the request within the 180 days. Next question. Is a small business based in the U.S., can we request a program fee waiver for 1 year? As a small business based in the U.S., can we request a program fee waiver for 1 year? I think I'm not sure exactly what the question is. If the question is, can you receive a small business waiver? The answer is no. The small business waiver is only applicable to the application fee. It's not applied to the annual program fee. But there are other waivers that are available. For example, the public health waiver, the buried innovation waiver, and orphan exemption waivers that are all applicable to the annual program fee. Next question. I have a question regarding the PDUFA user fee. You stated in the ID of the submission, administrative change not available for sale. When does it apply? When the sponsor submits the notice of discontinue of the product or withdrawal of the NDA? Specifically, this applies to when a product is being discontinued from marketing, if you're no longer selling the product. Now, if you're withdrawing the NDA, that still applies also. But in general, if your product is no longer being marketed, that's when you notify FDA. I hope I answered that question appropriately. Let's see. Next question. Could you please explain why PDUFA annual program fee is not assessed if the prescription drug product is listed in the Orange Book with the potency described in terms of 100 ml? Well, the reason why it's not assessed is because the statute currently states that if in terms of 100 mLs, which we mean by large volume parenterals, it will not be charged a fee. That's just how the statute is currently written. I hope that answers your question on that question. What is the difference between the $20 million and $50 million requirement in the orphan designation exemption? Specifically, the $20 million limit is not applicable to orphan designation. It's the $50 million requirement, and that only is applied to the worldwide gross annual revenue for the orphan exemption when it comes to the annual program fee. The $50 million does not apply to orphan exemption for application fees. Now, the $20 million limit, it applies to the program, to the public health and the buried innovation. And that's when we look at your working capital, as I mentioned in my slides.
And greetings all. I apologize for the technical difficulties that we've encountered. We were briefly knocked offline from our internet connection, but we're putting things back together and we're going to resume our Q&A now.
All right, our next question we have with regards to small business waiver. If a small company is working jointly with a large company on a product who has a lot of products, can the small company still get a small business waiver? I would have to answer this question by it depends. As I mentioned before, affiliations is taken into consideration when you submit a small business waiver. If your firm is considered affiliated with the other firm who you're jointly working with, then you can be over the 500 employee limit, or you could need to check if that other firm has submitted an application already. If that's the case, then you would no longer qualify. So to answer this question, I would have to say it depends. Mainly if the company you are working with is it considered an affiliate.
Okay. One question received, please clarify the program fee for biosimilar. What are the 5 programs referred to? So for a biosimilar product, it is a specific strength of a product in final dosage form. So with a application that is approved, if there are about, let's say, 7 different strengths for the biosimilar product, the maximum that the firm would be paying for would be 5 program fees. If a sponsor has an already marketed biosimilar under 351K, do they have to pay a full application fee if they have to file interchangeable application for the same product under BsUFA? Any provisions for a waiver? So if you have an approved application, you can submit, and the interchangeable is a supplement is submitted for an interchangeable product, then there is no fee for supplements. And unfortunately, there are no waivers for applications except for the small business waiver, which would be for the first biosimilar application.
We have a couple more questions. Is an authorized generic required for a program fee? If 2 labelers are used for the same authorized generic, how is the program fee applied to different labeler? Well, to answer this question, authorized generics are usually under the NDA application, so they aren't really generic drugs. They are still technically brand drugs, NDA drugs. And NDAs only list the products that are for the NDA product. If you're an authorized generic and under a different labeler, you do not show up twice in the Orange Book. You only show up once. So to answer your question, authorized generics aren't actually charged a program fee. It's mainly based on the NDA and not off the generic labeling. Hopefully that answers the question. Next, if a product line listing is removed from the discontinued to the active section of the Orange Book mid-FDA fiscal year, is a program fee assessed for the next federal fiscal year, or is the fee prorated? So if you submit a product, if you move a product from the discontinued section to the Orange Book to the active section of the Orange Book by mid-fiscal year, you are not charged a fee until the next fiscal year starts. So for example, if If you moved as of today in June, you won't be charged a program fee for fiscal year 18, but fiscal year 19, but for fiscal year 20 that's coming up, you will be charged this fee for fiscal year 20. We do not prorate it, but you wouldn't be charged a fee at all for this fiscal year. The public health requirement states that an applicant having less than $20 million will be met for the necessary to protect the public health requirement. How does that differ? I'm going to try to answer this question by rewording the question. I believe the question is, there are two requirements: that you must meet the public health, you must be considered a public health need, and have a financial requirement of less than $20 million. In order to meet the public health requirement, you must meet both requirements, and it's not just one of them. Hopefully, I'm reading the question right and answering correctly for whoever wrote this question. Thank you. Those are all the questions that we have at this point, and we will be going into our lunch break.